Hello there, and welcome back to buildqueue. This is going to be part 11 in a multi-part series about building Unity projects with Jenkins, and in this part we're going to be expanding upon our iOS build pipeline. We're going to build, sign, and then deploy to TestFlight. We have a lot to get to, so let's waste no time. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and open up our Unity project. Now that the Unity project's up, let's go ahead and navigate to the project settings because we need to change a few things here. Actually, a majority of our changes on the Unity side are going to be just project setting configurations. We're not going to make too many changes to our Unity side build script, but there is one change that I want to make, but we'll get to that in a minute. So open up build settings, open up player settings, and then navigate over to the iOS tab. And first off, let me just go ahead and say, I went ahead and made these changes myself. This is actually the second time that I'm recording this video, so please just follow along with what I'm talking about here. So the company name, you want to make the company name match the bundle identifiers that you created within the last part. And just in case you need a little refresher, go ahead and log into your Apple Developer Console if you need to find your identifiers. Under certificates, IDs, and profiles, just like identifiers. And this is the one that I'm using for this project. It's com.buildqueue.testunity project. And this needs to be reflected over on our project settings. So heading back over to Unity. So company name is buildqueue, product name, as I said at the end of the bundle identifier, is test Unity project. And then go ahead and set a version if you want. 1.0 is fine, or any value here is honestly okay. So we want to scroll down to the identification section and we want to actually fill out some fields here. One field that we don't want to fill out here is the build. We want to control this, but we're going to do that from our Unity build script. That's going to be the only change that we make to the Unity build script. Whenever we are posting to TestFlight and posting to the App Store, the build number always has to be an increment over the previous one. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to fetch our job number from our build pipeline, and this build number here will be set to our job number. It'll ensure that we always increase in value as we keep building our projects. The signing team ID, this can be found back over on the Apple Developer Console. So I'm going to open it back up once again. And if you take a look in the upper right hand corner, this is the ID that you need. Next up over here on the project settings, you want to take a look here, automatically sign, make sure that's disabled. We're going to manually sign this. iOS provisioning profile. The next thing that we need is a profile ID. This is a unique identifier tied to our provisioning profile that we created in the previous video. So how do we find this value? Well, I'm going to navigate over to my Mac Mini. I'm going to log in. Now that I'm logged in, I'm going to go ahead and open up a folder here. Just open a Finder somehow. I'm going to select downloads because that's where my provisioning profile is located. Jenkins Unity test.mobile provision is my provisioning profile that I'm using. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to select open with other. I don't want to open it with Xcode. BB edit is fine. So double click this or select open, get rid of any pop-ups. And then you're going to scroll down on here. If you scroll down far enough, you'll see this here. It's called UUID. It's the unique identifier for our provisioning profile. So you're going to want to copy this value here. So find the string, and then you're going to need to transfer this over. After you've entered your profile ID, the next thing you need to do is you need to choose a profile type. And we're not using development, we're not using automatic, use distribution. And then if you want to modify anything else while you're here, if you want to modify iPhone plus iPad, or if you want to make it iPhone or iPad only, feel free. If you're watching this a little bit later into the future and they make it to where you have to update the minimum iOS version, you can go ahead and update it here. For us, it doesn't really matter right now, at least as of October of this year. So this is it, just save your changes. And as I said before, we do have to make one minor change to our Unity side build script. So let's go ahead and open that up and let's change this build value here. After you've opened up your Unity side build script, you're gonna scroll down to the build iOS method. And I went ahead and made the change. So you're going to be modifying the player settings.ios.build number. The build number is the value that we want to change, and we want to set it equal to an environment variable. And how we do that is we do it like this: environment.getEnvironment variable, and then inside of quotations, build number. So build number is actually a special environment variable that always gets set every time you run any Jenkins job. So if you're running job number 7, then this value is going to be 7. You don't have to directly call it out within your Jenkins file. It'll automatically just show up if you reference it like this. That will be everything that we have to change over on the build script. We just have to add this one line in, and our Jenkins file, we don't have to touch it at all. all because we had to actually make a new one. The next build pipeline script that we're going to create is going to be running on our Mac device. So it's going to be separate from this one. So let's go ahead and start creating it. So as you can see, I have opened up File Explorer here. And I went ahead and created the Groovy script, and yes, you don't actually have to name your Jenkins file Jenkinsfile. So I named this one test iOS deployment.groovy, and once again, this is in the very root of our repository. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up with VS Code. So this script is actually going to be a little bit more involved than you'd initially think. In order to explain everything in a more digestible manner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create basically a skeleton for this build pipeline, and then I'll explain each stage along the way. I'll go ahead and create the stages, but I won't fill them out right now. The very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create the pipeline, and then I'm going to create an agent, and the agent that I'm going to be using here is my iOS agent. The iOS agent we set up a couple videos ago, and this is how we ensure that this build pipeline is going to run on this agent. And in case you need to find out how to get the agent name, in case you forgot it, navigate over to Jenkins. You're going to sign in, select Manage Jenkins, select Nodes, and your node is right here. This is the agent that you're going to use, and it's called iOS agent, and make sure that you have all the capitalization and everything correct too. Next thing that we want to put here is we want to put a space to encapsulate all of our environment variables, and trust me, we're going to fill this out a lot, but we'll cross that bridge later. The next thing that I've added here are the stages. So the very first stage that we're going to fill out is unlock keychain, and what this is going to do is this is going to basically give us the permissions that we need in order to run a lot of the Xcode commands that we need to run later on. That will be more in stage 3. Stage 1 and 2 are basically just getting things primed and ready for stage 3 and 4. The second stage is PLIST configuration file update. Basically what this is going to do is this is going to house a lot of our information that is going to be used for signing our application. This will be important whenever we get around to publishing to TestFlight. Stage 3 here is called build and sign IPA with Xcode. So what this is going to do is this will clean our build, it will archive our build, and then it will export the archive as an IPA. And this IPA can be seen as basically a bundle that has all the information needed to upload the application to TestFlight. And then finally, for the fourth stage, after we've built our IPA, we're going to be publishing it to TestFlight. The equivalent over on the Android side is a AAB file, in case anyone was curious. Okay, so that's the stages explained basically in a nutshell. So the way that I'm going to go about this, you're going to see me jumping back and forth a lot between the environment variables and the stages. I will go ahead and put in environment variables for each stage as I get to them, and then I'll jump down to explaining exactly what's going on within the stage. So let's go ahead and knock out unlocking the keychain. So here at the top, I went ahead and added a couple of variables. I added keychain password, and I'm going to separate some things out into different categories just so it looks a little bit cleaner. The first thing that I have here is the keychain password. So basically the keychain password is just the password to your user account on your Mac device. My username is buildqueue, and then I stored my credentials over on Jenkins, well, the password at least, as secret text. So if you want to see that, just open up Jenkins. We should already be on Manage Jenkins. Just go back one, and then credentials, select global, and then here's where I put it in. I guess I sort of have it doubled up here, but this is the one I'm using, the Mac Mini password. And once again, storing it as secret text. If you want to add it yourself, just select add credentials, change the kind to secret text, and then fill your information in here. Make sure that you put your password inside the secret area. The next variable here is the keychain path, and this is the path to my login.keychain/db file. This is needed for whenever we are trying to unlock this. So if we actually take a look over at stage for unlock keychain, you want to add steps, script, and then inside of a shell script, and the single quotes are important since we're passing in some credentials here. Do not use double quotes, use single quotes, otherwise Jenkins will yell at you saying that your credentials may have been leaked. You're going to type in security, unlock keychain-p, and then we're going to reference our keychain password first, and then our keychain path. And just bear in mind, use whatever username that you have here inside of your keychain path. Don't use buildqueue, that's mine. So that should be it for unlocking the keychain. That will let us build with Xcode later on. Before I fill out the next stage, I went ahead and put in the environment variables for the stage because I want to go ahead and explain them before we get there. So the very first one that I added is under IPA building configuration under environment variables. variables. So the first one that I added is PLIST file location. And this is just a location to a PLIST file that we're going to be using. So what is a PLIST file going to do? Well, this is going to house a lot of information that's needed for signing our project, and then it's used whenever we go to export. The next section is here, signing information. We need our team ID. I went ahead and told you how to get your team ID whenever we are making changes to the Unity project itself. You'll just navigate to the Apple Developer Console in your browser, and in the upper right hand corner it should show you your team ID. We need a reference to the project identifier, so the one that we set up is com.buildqueue.testunity project. Put your own example in here that you're using. Provisioning profile name, the name that I gave my provisioning profile was Jenkins Unity Test. If you would like to see what yours is, then you'll go ahead and open up the Apple Developer Console, select profiles under certificates, IDs, and profiles, and it should be here. You'll want to use this name. And I have two things that may seem a little bit redundant here. We have code sign identity plist, and then we have code sign identity. And the reason why I have two of them here is just in case you have special characters within the plist one here, this is where you can configure this. For instance, if I had an ampersand within my code sign identity, then this is how this variable would need to look. It would be Daniel ampersand amp semicolon Watkins. And we will need to use code sign identity later on where we don't want to include those. So this would be an example of what it would look like whenever we have to use this other field. But if you're confident that you're not going to use any special characters, you can get away with just having one variable for all these. Now, how do we find our code sign identity? Well, you want to open up your Mac, you'll want to open up a terminal, and then you want to put this command in. You want to put security find identity -p code signing -v. Then you select enter, and then you are going to find the value that has the same team ID that you're used to seeing. And this is the one that I'm used to seeing here. This is the one that is tied to the distribution that we've been using. It has the same team ID. So this is what we need to put in this code signing field. So everything within quotations here, Apple distribution, Daniel Watkins, and then the team ID name. Yours may look different. The very last one that I wanted to add here, it doesn't necessarily tie directly to this stage, but in one of the environments that I've worked in before, it had trouble accessing the path variables. For instance, I couldn't really access xcrun, which is something that's used whenever we post to TestFlight. And then I also had issues chaining ownership to file with chmod. So this helped it out a little bit, although I'm still putting the path in whenever I reference both of those tools. So you'll see that later on, but this is just a failsafe. All right, so let's take a look at this stage here. I know it may seem overwhelming at first, but trust me, it really is not that complicated. So basically what's happening is we are checking to see if this plist file exists. If it doesn't exist, we create it and we populate it with all the data that it needs. And if it already exists, then this doesn't really do anything. So this is a lot of words for something that will only happen once, most likely. So here at the top, we're checking if the file exists, and it's set to our plist file location variable that we specified up at the top. If it does not exist, then it is going to write out the contents of this variable out to a file. And you may think that the formatting looks a little off here. It looks a little inconsistent. This is done deliberately. Your plist spacing is very important. So if that is off, then it won't work properly. I will probably leave an excerpt of this in the description so you guys can copy it exactly as I have it here. But yes, basically this value here is just the contents that we're going to write out to a file, and that actually comes next. After we have set this variable, we are going to write it out to a file, and to do that we do write file, and then we're writing it out to our plist file location, and the text that we're going to be putting there is going to be everything that's inside of plist content, which is this variable here. And then just for debugging, I added a couple echo things here that you can see whenever the job runs. And that's basically it for this stage. Time to move on to building and signing the IPA with Xcode. One thing that I noticed that we missed whenever we were putting together our environment variables, under plist file location, I have a reference to the project name, so I went ahead and created that up here at the top, and it's just the name of our project. I named mine Jenkins Unity Test, and then I went ahead and created a project path, so whenever we run our Xcode builds, it'll know exactly what it needs to build. So go ahead and set this to wherever it is that you are exporting your project to. Again, on my desktop, I have a Jenkins build folder, and that's where everything is going inside of. Moving on to the other environment variables for the next stage, I went ahead and added an Xcode Xcode project path. So this is going to be equal to our project path up above, and then the name of our Xcode project. The next thing is going to be the scheme, and whenever we open up our Xcode project, we will see a few different targets. One of those targets is going to be Unity iPhone. Another one that you may see are Unity unit tests and Unity framework. Don't necessarily need to worry about those too much. Just go ahead and set the scheme to Unity iPhone. That's the one that we need to sign. That is the one that contains our application. Configuration can be either release or debug. We want to do release. And then provisioning profile UUID. We went over this whenever we were working on modifying the Unity project settings. So this is going to be that same number. And once again, if you need to retrieve it again from your Mac device, then open up the provisioning profile in BB Edit and then scroll down to UUID, and this will be there. Let's go ahead and talk about this stage here now. So it's called Build and Sign IPA with Xcode. So this is broken down into a few different parts. I went ahead and labeled those just so it's a little bit more clear. So the very first thing that we're going to do inside of here, and also make sure that you have project path set as an environment variable, because that's needed literally right here in the very beginning. A shell script that is running on the project path. This is chaining the ownership of all the files that were transferred, just so that we can use it without having any issues. It's more just a failsafe. Next thing that we want to do is we want to scan our project.pbx file, and then we want to set the code sign style from automatic to manual. Whenever you build your project out with Unity, it's going to set it to automatic by default. That's not what we want. We want it to be manual. We're going to manually sign this application. The third part here says clean and build the Xcode project. So this does two different things. The very first thing it does is it cleans the project here. You have to pass in the Xcode project path. You have to pass in the scheme and then the configuration. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to archive the project. The archive is what we are going to build our IPA off of. In order to do so, we have to do Xcode build archive -project, and then set the project path, the scheme, which is going to be iPhone Unity, I believe. And then this / is a next line. This is all one big command here. -configuration. Our configuration is going to be release. Archive path. This is where our archive is going to be exported. It has a default location, but it's a little strange to track down. So just for simplicity reasons, and so I don't accidentally bloat my Mac device, especially since I only have a limited amount of space on it, I'm spitting out this archive inside of my project path at this location. Project path, archive, and then specifying the scheme name, and then .xc archive. And this will be wiped out whenever we deploy a new build to the Mac Mini. It will override all this information, so it shouldn't take up too much space over time. Another / to go ahead and go to the next line, and then we are going to set some signing information here. So we set the code sign identity to our variable from the top. Next line, we set our provisioning profile UUID to the variable up at the top called provisioning profile UUID. And then next line, development team is equal to our team ID that we specified at the top. And then the last thing that we're doing for the Xcode build archive is other code sign flags. And here we are just passing in keychain and then specifying the keychain path. After we've cleaned and built the Xcode project, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to export the IPA from the archive. So another shell script here. This one's going to be Xcode build export archive. This is going to create our IPA file, which is basically a bundled version of our project. We need to specify the archive path that we exported to up above. So it's going to be project path /archive /scheme.xc archive, which is Unity iPhone .xc archive /export options plist. And this variable is actually wrong. 1 second. Okay, this is the actual value. It's the plist file location. It's looking for that plist that we created up above. And then go to the next line, export path, and our IPA is going to be exported to our project path /build. And that should be everything that we need to build and sign the IPA with Xcode. After we have our IPA ready to go, the next thing that we do is we upload to TestFlight. So let's go over the final stage. Let's go over the variables that are needed for the final stage. The first one is going to be IPA name. This one's going to live inside IPA building configuration. And this one is going to be set to our project identifier, the tail end of it, .ipa. It's grabbing grabbing this name from our Unity project that we specified over here. Now I'm on the Unity editor. If I open the project settings, it's going to be the product name. And if I scroll down, I didn't update anything in signing information. I added these variables here inside of TestFlight exporting variables. The very first one is exporting username. This is going to be the developer account that you're using to export. So it's going to be buildqueueofficial@gmail.com for myself. That's the email that I'm using. And then exporting password is going to be credentials, and it's going to be a special type of credential. Actually, you can't just put your normal password in here. At least I don't think that you can. I have always used an app specific password. So it's time to go on a little bit of a history lesson real quick. I'll explain it as we go ahead and create our app specific password. The first thing that you need to do is you need to open up a new tab in the browser and go to account.apple.com and then go ahead and sign in with your credentials. After you signed in, over in the lower right hand corner, select view details on app specific passwords. So what this says here is use an app specific password to sign in to an app or service not provided by Apple. So here's a little bit of background information about what's going on here, because you may read this and think TestFlight is a service that's provided by Apple. Well, TestFlight used to be its own separate entity entirely from Apple. It used to basically be an environment for people to test out their applications for a variety of different hardware. Not just for Apple devices, but now it's, to my knowledge, exclusively Apple. So that's why this is requiring an app-specific password, because while it is a service that is provided and I believe maintained now by Apple, there was a point in time where it wasn't. Apple had acquired them. So as you can see, I went ahead and already created my own password. I'm just going to create another one that I'm going to end up revoking. So you're going to select the plus symbol here. You're going to name it whatever you want. I named mine TestFlight. I'm just going to create a temporary one called TestFlight 2. You'll need to supply your password. Okay, and do not click off of this. This is going to be the only time that you'll see this password. It's a lot like an access token. So copy it down, keep it safe somewhere. Personally, I went and I saved this as a new credential over on Jenkins. So you can right click this, copy, navigate over to Jenkins, navigate over to manage Jenkins, and then go to credentials and then select global. Then you're going to add a new credential here. And this one is going to be secret text, and you'll paste in your value here, and then you'll name this whatever it is that you want. For myself, I just named it app specific password. I don't know what it is about specific being spelled in all caps. It just looks like a typo, but it isn't. And that will be it for all the environment variables that we're going to create. So let's go ahead and go down to the stage and fill that out. So this stage here isn't going to be very big. It's only going to be doing one thing. It's just directly uploading to TestFlight, and it does it all in one command. So from stage, you're going to have steps, script with environment, and we are setting another environment variable for project path here. And then just for the console, I put uploading to TestFlight, and this is the shell script that you're going to run. You're going to run xc run alt tool upload app type iOS file, and the file that we're going to be uploading, it's going to be our IPA. It's going to be located in our project path /builds/ the IPA name, and the IPA name we specified up above. And then the username is going to be our exporting username, and the password is going to be exporting password. And once again, since we do have some credentials that are here, make sure that your shell script is encapsulated inside of a single quote block. And that's it. That's all that we need to do. And this should upload everything that we need to TestFlight. So let's go back over to Jenkins. There's something that I want to talk to you about over there before we really test this out. If you have ever exported anything in the past to the App Store using Jenkins, you're probably aware of a certain plugin. So I'm going to select Manage Jenkins. I'm going to navigate to that plugin. After you go back to Manage Jenkins, go to Plugins, Available Plugins, and here at the top, after you type in Xcode, there's a plugin that's called Xcode Integration. And what this did was basically everything that we just set up. However, an issue with it is it falls behind, and honestly, relying on open source plugins is typically not really the safest thing to do. For instance, whenever I was using this prior to me putting together my own custom solution, it was working fine whenever I was using Unity 2020 and 2021, but whenever I started using Unity 2022, it stopped working for me. I couldn't build and deploy to the App Store anymore using this plugin. And if I select this plugin and it brings me to its page and I go over to their GitHub, once again, this is all open source software, so we have to rely on people to update it, and very grateful for the people that did update it. However, it's now over 2 years old. It's over 2 years behind, and it's for the most part been abandoned. So it's just not reliable, and we want to put together reliable solutions. So that's why I went ahead and created my own custom solution that does basically the exact same thing that this Xcode plugin does. Finding a lot of that information was not fun. I will go ahead and say that. I had many headaches putting that together. And the other benefit of creating your own custom solution for a lot of these things is I can use a plugin, but I don't really understand what's going on in the background, where if you create it from scratch, you learn things to a much deeper level. Okay, my ranting and rambling about plugins is over, so go ahead and push your work up to your repository. And we're not going to be using this the way that you think that we would. So I will see you over on Jenkins. Now that we're here, now that we've pushed up all of our code to our repository, the next thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and put together our build pipeline. And ignore this. This was my previous attempt. Once again, this is the second time I've recorded this. And if you want to see how it went last time, this is about how it went last time. Very annoying. I am going to delete this actually. I want you to select new item here at the top left. I'm going to type in TestFlight exporter for the item name, and I'm going to select pipeline. I'm not going to copy from any other pipeline, so I'm just going to select OK. I went ahead and added a description. This will publish our project to TestFlight. Now we do want to go ahead and set up a build trigger. We want this to trigger after our iOS build. So select the first one, select the first option here. I'm typing in iOS and it autofill the rest here, iOS Unity project. Whenever you select that, it tries to select something else. So backspace a little bit, get rid of the comma. And then I want to trigger only if the build is stable. And just a heads up, this is going to attempt to post and run this build even if you don't deploy, so just keep that in mind whenever you run the other job. You want to make sure that you deploy. So I may actually go and change some default settings over there, but this is fine. And before we use pipeline script from SEM, and I know that we are version controlling our script, however, I'm going to paste the contents of our Jenkins file into here directly. So I'm coming over here, I am copying everything from test iOS deployment.groovy, and I'm pasting it into here. So why is it that I'm doing this? Well, there are a few things that happen inconsistently whenever you're working with Jenkins and you're working with pipeline script from SEM. One thing that I've noticed, at least in my personal work environment, is sometimes whenever you select this, you select Git and you select your credentials, and obviously you put in a repository URL. Sometimes it likes to randomly, and I don't know what causes it. I haven't been able to find the solution. So if you guys know of a way to get this to work properly, please let me know. It will randomly use a credentials file from a previously run job. It's very weird, but basically it can cause everything to fail. And I don't want this to fail because of some sort of authentication issue, because then I'm going to have to come back in and I'm going to have to manually run this, and I don't want to run this manually. I want this to trigger after this other pipeline succeeds. So it's just more stable keeping this as a pipeline script and pasting my contents in here. Now, whenever I make some changes to this pipeline script within here, I still make sure to add those changes to my repository. So if I modify keychain in here, I'm going to reflect that change over here in VS Code at the keychain area. But if you're comfortable using pipeline script from SEM, you can set it up like the previous build pipelines that we've already put together, and it should work hopefully, but just be aware that it may try to use credentials from another build pipeline. Again, very inconsistent. So I'm going to select save, and I'm getting a little nervous now, especially after how much the previous recording of this gave me a headache. I'm going to go ahead and start running this build, and then we'll see if it will automatically trigger this build, which I'm pretty sure it will, and then we'll see if it properly exports to TestFlight. So I'm selecting iOS Unity project, build with parameters. Actually, before I select anything here, I'm selecting configure. I am setting deploy iOS Mac by default, so it always will try to do this at least. And then I'm going to build. I don't really need to post it to Nexus right now. If you want to deploy Nexus, feel free. I don't want to. Select build, and this will take a few minutes. Instead of watching this build pipeline over here, I'm going to come back to the dashboard, and I'm going to go ahead and monitor TestFlight exporter and see whenever it picks up this job. One more thing, actually, while this iOS Unity project is still building, keep an eye on this number right here. This is job number 15. Whenever we check TestFlight, it's going to say that this is going to be build number 15. It's going to pull it from our job here. Okay, just cutting in here, it seems like it did automatically start this build after the other one succeeded. So great, let's see if this one passes now. And it seems like everything succeeded. So it has built and signed our application, and then it has uploaded it to TestFlight. So let's go ahead and verify that everything is there on TestFlight. In order to get there, you want to go ahead and sign into the Apple Developer Console, select Apps under App Store Connect. Here's the application, Unity Test Jenkins, and you'll be brought to this page. So let's see, is everything going to show up in TestFlight? And it is here in TestFlight. And as you can see, I have uploaded a few things here that was mostly on my previous attempt on this video. And you can go ahead and ignore the missing compliance thing here. That's not necessarily something that we have to worry about with our build pipeline. Basically, all it is app encryption documentation. They just want you to add another option to your PLIST file for specifying what type of encryption algorithms you're using. I'm pretty sure we're not using any, so I can just select none, select save, and boom, that's done. But yes, it will take a few minutes for this to process, and after it's done processing, any testers that are on a testing list will get an email, and they will be able to retrieve the contents of this build. Okay, it is finally done. I'm all done with Apple. I never have to do anything for them ever again. And I could not be happier. That's not true. I still have some Apple stuff that I have to deal with for work. But as far as tutorials, I can wipe my hands clean for a little bit. Let's do a little bit of recap because this one was a little bit more involved than our previous build platforms. So we went ahead and modified things on the Unity side, some project settings, and we modified our function that is responsible for building the iOS project. The iOS project is in the form of an Xcode project. And then we set up our build pipeline to build the Unity project, and then we exported the contents of that to our Mac device. We set up another agent on a Mac device. We used that agent to go ahead and sign our project, and then we were able to publish it to TestFlight. That's quite a lot of stuff. I've personally learned a lot putting this part of the course together, and I hope that you guys took a lot of information from this. This part was not necessarily too easy, so thank you for having patience and sticking it out with me as I put this together. So that's going to be a wrap for Apple, and the course is almost over. We only have one more episode left. One more episode, episode 12 is going to conclude it, and it's going to be going over basically the exact same thing that we just did here, but for the Google Play Store. And I feel like it's not going to be quite as involved as this one was. We don't have to set up any additional agents. We don't have to do anything else that's super complicated. So we'll knock that out, and then we'll conclude the course in the next video. Thank you for stopping by and watching the series up until this point, and I'll see you in the next and final episode. Goodbye.